Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Oh, cocked, locked. Here we go. And I'll say correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us. We broadcast Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. So if you'd like to call us during those hours, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line is up and running. 605-477-3249. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli, and I'm delighted to be broadcasting with fellow broadcaster Michael Olson, metrofarm.com. And you can hear him on GCN Saturday mornings, 9 through 10 a.m. Pacific time, 9 to 10 Pacific time on Saturday mornings, right here on GCN. Welcome, Michael.
Well, hello, locked and cocked and locked too.
Well, that's great. That's great. So, Michael, we're going to be talking about government cheese and how to farm for government cheese. And that's the term that one of our instructors uses when he talks about getting an income stream from the government or payouts from the government. And you have on your website, the metrofarm.com food chain radio show, number 1161, Farming the Federal Government. How does one farm the federal government? Please share with us your thoughts on that.
Well, a long time ago, back in the Depression days of the 30s, the Franklin Roosevelt administration of the federal government decided that we have to do something to protect our farmers from this calamity of an economy. And, if you think about it, we city folks probably are pretty amenable to supporting our farmers because, gee whiz, without farmers, we'd last about 3 days, right? And all the grocery stores would be empty then, and then what would we do? So way down deep inside, we city people know that we have to figure out how to support our farmers or we're going to be in incredibly deep trouble really fast. So the notion that the government put on the table back then was, well, we're going to help the farmers out by providing this kind of program and that kind of program and this kind of program. And so the program was designed to help the family farmer. Good deal. Who can argue about that? But through the years, that helping the family farmer kind of morphed into a situation in which we are giving a relatively very few farmers a lot of money, and a lot of those farmers live in places like Beverly Hills. So what in the heck happened? How did this come to be? Here's some numbers that kind of are head-scratchers for me. 389 farmers receive over $1 million a year, with one farmer getting $10 million a year, and it gets worse. $17 million in farm subsidies were sent to the 5 most populated cities in the U.S. Nearly $5 million in farm subsidies were sent to the elites who live in 150 of America's most expensive zip codes. So what happened to our farm programs that the money gets subverted and goes to places where, come on, Beverly Hills? You got to be kidding. What kind of farmers live in Beverly Hills that need subsidies? Don't think so. So I think over the course of time, those government good intentions become subverted, as do they so often do. That's what I think where we're at today.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I was at the Farmers Cooperative, probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I was talking to some of the older farmers. Now, I'm 66, so I'm one of them. And these are the guys that wear overalls or coveralls. Mm-hmm. I don't. I wear blue jeans, and
you can probably tell by shaking their hands, right? You can probably tell they're actually farmers by shaking their hand and feeling the calluses on their hands.
That's exactly right. And I was talking with them about farm subsidies. And they have what they call government programs that will help you with a well. So when we have droughts here in Missouri, all of a sudden you hear about these programs by the USDA and the Soil and Water Conservation people that they'll help you drill a well, and they'll pay 75% of the cost, and the farmers line up because they want these wells so they can water their cows because the streams have dried, the ponds have dried, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to water their cattle.
Yeah.
Well, the term flat field came up, and I'd never heard that term.
Flat field.
They said they want a flat field. Flat field. What they meant was they wanted a level playing field, whereby everyone has an equal opportunity to compete for these programs. And they said it's not fair. They don't have a flat field. What they're saying is that the same families over and over and over and over again get these government handouts, whereas they can't seem to get them. So the wealthier farmers are getting more wealthy, buying more land, and the typical farmer like me and like the guys I was talking to are not part of a flat field. We are cast out, cut out, and prevented from, if we wanted to, getting this government handout. So that ties exactly with what you were saying. 389 farmers get over $1 million a year from the government. One farmer gets $10 million. What in the heck is that farmer doing, compared to what the rest of us are doing, riding on our ripped tractor seats, with our old rusty tractors, right?
Well, the farm that's getting $10 million a year is a picture-perfect American family farm. A couple brothers got together and developed a farm. They don't have a lot of land. I think like 400 acres or something like that. But they have learned over the course of time how to work the system pretty good, and so they're getting upwards of $10 million a year from the federal government to farm and to not farm as well. They have lots of programs, So here they got $10 million a year, and they say that their two sons want to stay in the farming business. Well, duh. If the government's giving you $10 million a year, I suspect anybody would want to stay in the farming business.
You bet.
So it always comes down to the fact, whenever I have a theory about federal government and us, especially we little people, I think that we become frightened of the very big people, and we run to the federal government and say, government, please protect us from those very big people. And the government says, well, you little person, I'm very happy to do that. And so what the federal government, or any government does for that matter, is that they pass some laws to protect the little people. And then once the government has these laws in effect, and the irony is that the more power we little people give the federal government to protect us from the big people, the more attractive the federal government becomes to the big people. Because here is a structure now that we can buy and change to better suit ourselves. Let me give you the perfect example of that. Here on the California Central Coast, we kind of was the birthplace of organic farming. And organic farming started by essentially a bunch of little people who were growing food in or near the city for the city. And they were using these bio-intensive soil preparations and whatnot to grow food that was truly nutritious and whatnot. And they were very proud of that. But there was no official definition for the word organic, so anybody could be organic, and everybody was. Well, I'm organic and you're organic, so what they did is they decided to go to the federal government, and they enlisted a local congressman here on the California Central Coast, and they adopted a federal designation for the word organic. In other words, the little people gave their word organic to the federal government for safekeeping. Protect us from the big people, please, they said. The government said, well, we'd be most happy to do that. And so the government took ownership of the word organic and now owns it. Now, what happens then? Well, people started buying organic food like crazy, and everybody wanted it because it was clean, and it came from organic or biologically intensive soil, and it was full of life and nutrition, and it was great stuff. So people started buying organic food like crazy. Sales went through the roof. What did the big guys do? Hey, we want to play too. And yet these rules that had been set up were really difficult rules for the big boys to comply with. So what did they do? Well, they went to the federal government and the National Organic Standards Boards and said, listen, here's a small donation to your grandmother's whatever, birthday party or something. We'll take this nice donation and help us change these rules so we can be organic too. And so that's what happened to organic. They diluted the rules of organic to the extent that just about anybody could be organic. And you can even have organic food grown in just water now, hydroponic. So that's what happened when the little people went to the federal government and said, please protect us from the big people.
Mm-hmm. And what you're talking about, Michael Olson, is erecting barriers to entry. And now the barriers are higher and higher and higher against the little people. We'll be right back. Metrofarm.com. Michael Olson's with us. Michael, the U.S. Department of Agriculture comprises 29 agencies and offices with about 100,000 employees in the United States, 4,500 locations, which is, if you average it out, that's 90 per state. That's just the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So those are the guys that will come out to your farm and look it over and say, hey, you know what, we can put up some fencing and we can keep your cows out of the creeks, streams, rivers, ponds, and the woods, and we'll pay for 75% of the cost of doing that. And now that your cows are out of the streams, the ponds, the creeks, we'll put a well in for you. We'll put some cattle waterers in. And, this is I had them come out to my farm in Virginia. By the time they were done, it was $33,000 worth of fence and well and cattle waterers. And they were willing to pay for 3/4 of it. Actually, back then it was 90%. I didn't do it. But those are some of the programs that we're talking about. So
well, we do love to take care of our farmers, Vincent. That's just the nature of we city people. And so, when the federal government comes up with these ideas, well, sure, let's help the farmers. Because we're totally... You think about how vulnerable we city people have become, have made ourselves by moving into these concrete jungles and relying on food that comes from thousands of miles away. And, that's pretty vulnerable if you really think about it. So when we were sitting in our little cubicles and eating our food, way down deep, we know that how vulnerable we are and how far we've removed ourselves from the sources of our food. And so, the federal government says, we should help the farmers put fences up. Okay, sure, go right ahead. That's our basic nature.
I'll tell you a short story. So when I lived in Virginia, there was we'll call it a bloodline of people who worked at the public school system. And one of the wives of one of the administration was given a job. Now, the average teacher back then made about $26,000 a year. I'm talking about in the 1990s. About $26,000 a year was what the average teacher made. Well, they decided to pay the wife of one of the administrator types $40,000 a year and give her a job that had never been filled before as a brand new job, and she was a grants writer. The idea of this job was to go get money. That was the entire purpose of this job, to go farm for government money. Okay,
so it's a sales
for education,
job, right?
Yeah, it was a sales job.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the school that I was a teacher at received national attention. We were one of the top 100 schools, public schools in our size, and it was because we had a marketing person, a salesperson, selling what we were doing and bringing in more than the $40,000 that we were paying her. So I think there is a lot of potential for what you're talking about, depending on what the strings are that are attached. You might be able to farm for government money by having one of your family farm people go and write grants.
Mm-hmm.
Respond to grants.
If you think about it, that's a full-time job, right?
It is. It is a full-time job, and I'm trying to figure out, there are a lot of things I would like to do, and none of them bring in the millions of dollars that you're talking about that these other guys are doing. Now, if this guy is bringing in, let's say, $10 million a year on 400 acres, I would be absolutely delighted to get a small percentage of that on 241 acres, because I can't do it. I can't do it, the hard way. It's impossible to do it the hard way, raising cows.
Not even with cannabis anymore, since it's legal, you can't do that either. So what can you do? The government is your only option for that kind of money.
Yeah, let's talk about that when we come back. What do we do? How do we do it? What does it take? And at what risk do we put ourselves farming the government cheese? Michael Olson. So, Michael Olson, I went to grants.gov, grants.gov, and there's a funding opportunity titled Broad Agency Announcement, Harnessing Local Innovations, Expertise, and Partnerships to Solve Development Challenges in Asia. Goes on to say they seek opportunities to co-create, co-design, co-invest, and collaborate in the research, development, piloting, testing, and scaling of innovative, practical, and cost-effective interventions that address development challenges in Asia. Well, I can do that. I've got an invention or an innovation right here in my head, and I'll even tell you what it is. So what happens is farm fencing goes down. It breaks. Trees fall on it. Well, all right, so what do you do? Well, you go fix it when you learn about it, right? But how do you learn about it before the cows get out? Well, that's not always so easy. So if you have a large farm, it's real simple. We build a cattle fencing system that has sections of fence that are connected to electronics that we can develop quite easily, that will text your smartphone and say, the north section 1 of the fence has failed. Now, pretty simple. Easy to do. and we can do it. So here we could pursue that grant right there. But
and why not?
Well, I'm sitting here thinking, this farming that we're doing requires backhoes and bulldozers and excavation equipment and heavy lifting, and all the farmers I know were taller when they started than they are now. Their backs were straighter than they are now, and it's not so hard typing on a keyboard. But I'm thinking, wow, all you have to do is be creative and innovative, and you can pursue these grants. Now, how much is this grant? Well, it doesn't say, but what it does say is that there's this guy Benjamin Duadu, who is the contracting officer / negotiator. So it sounds to me like you contact him and you say, okay, here's the proposal, here's what we can do, and it'll take $7.8 million to do it for phase 1. Now there's phase 2, which would be the implementation phase or the teaching phase, and then you have all these phases, and you just build this thing out for 10 years.
And the thing that is interesting is how are we going to show Asia how to improve their development, right? That's the basic thesis of this grant proposal.
Right.
And please tell us how we can improve the development of Asia. Mm-hmm. Now, that reminds me of a book called Farmers of 40 Centuries by F.H. King. Have you ever heard of that?
No, please tell us about that.
F.H. King was a Secretary of Agriculture way back at the turn of the last century. And he went to Asia to, bring our modern technology to Asia, to show those people over there how to do things the modern way. And, of course, we have the chemicals and we have the tractors and we have all of this stuff to bring to Asia to show them how to do things. But when he got there, nothing he had made any sense, simply by virtue of the fact that the farmers of Asia, who have been farming for 40 centuries, right, 4,000 years of developing their space-intensive technology, just had no use for these other technologies that being offered by the West. And this is what F.H. King wrote in Farmers of 40 Centuries. With our broad fields, our machinery, and few people, their system appears to us crude and impossible. But cut our holdings to the size of theirs, and the same stroke makes our machinery, even our plows, still more impossible. And so the more one studies the environment of these people, their numbers, what they have done and are doing, against what odds they have succeeded, the more difficult it comes to see what course might have been better. So when we look at how they do things and just glance at it, it looks kind of silly. But, if your farm were to cut down to like 3 acres, what they do would make a lot more sense to you then. And so when we, come up with these ideas on how to help Asia develop, better be pretty careful, because those people are pretty smart over there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was talking with one of our instructors about all these neat little balers, hay balers that they have in Asia, and you can buy them here, and you can use very small tractors, and you can bale these little, cute size, fun size bales. Well, they can almost pick up by hand. Well, that makes no sense for us. On the scale that we're farming, and our scale is nowhere near the scale of other farms. So, we're like a very small farm compared in the United States compared to some of these, farms in Iowa. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. A hay baler on 3 acres would be way different than a hay baler on 40 acres or 120 acres or 640 acres.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So it depends on what the market is and what the environment is and all of those different things, which is what makes farming so interesting, because the farmer must be the master of his or her environment and marketplace. And every environment in every market is different. So, you really become the master of your own little world there, and you have to be to survive.
So how how does one begin the process of farming the government? What steps would you suggest that we take? So someone says, you know what? Let's set the stage like this. So a person sitting behind a desk and says, that's it. I've had it with these people who keep coming and I keep scheduling their appointments and I'm sick of it. I don't want to do it anymore. I want to buy a farm. I don't know much about farming, but I sure could use some money. In that situation, do you have a suggestion that the person could, or the family could, buy a farm and then find some grant to help pay for the farm? How would that work?
That'd be a great question. But a lot of people are doing it. You know, a lot of people who have cash are buying farmland and signing up for the various kinds of farm programs, of which there are three fundamental basic programs. There is risk coverage, which is like crop insurance. I have a friend, a very close friend, who works in a farm bureau up in Montana, where they have an occasional hailstorm. And she says that farmers can call 1 hour before a storm and get insurance, crop insurance for hail. So that's a pretty good deal. I bet other businesses would like to have that kind of insurance, don't you think, where you see the storm coming?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
So there's marketing assistance where they give you money to market your products. They cover your losses. So there's a lot of different programs that people sign up for. But if you have a lot of money, pretty easy to do. You buy, a big chunk of farmland and then register with the government and move to Beverly Hills. And then, you collect money on these various government programs. So that's a strategy. But if you're thinking about actually having a farm and actually farming, that's another story entirely. And what comes to my mind is that sooner or later, even we city people are going to come to our senses and realize that so much of our tax money is going into unproductive kinds of subsidies that aren't really doing anybody any good. There's no reason for us to give one farm $10 million a year. There's no reason for us to be sending our tax money to farmers who live in Beverly Hills. It just doesn't make any sense. And sooner or later, it's going to come to the point where, we're going to take care of that problem. And if you're that farmer who's getting $10 million a year and all of a sudden you're not getting anything, it's going to be a different world for you. So I always think that asking for help and getting help is a double-edged sword. It can help you, but it can also enslave you. And so I always think you should be very careful when you're signing up for help from the government. I mean, it's frightening to me. I think it is probably to you as well. It gets right down to
it. I've got. I have one of those threats in my hand from the USDA. It says USDA 2017 Census of Agriculture. Your voice, your future, your opportunity. Then below that it says the U.S. Census of Agriculture report enclosed. Your response is required by law. I've got a bunch of these, and I have the Census of Agriculture. When they get your name, they put you on this mailing list, and you get all kinds of free pamphlets. And one of these pamphlets that I got says that they want some information from us, and it says that thank you for your cooperation. It will be used for statistical purposes only. It will be kept confidential, and it complies with the Paperwork Reduction Act of 1995, and it's 16 pages long, and they want to know things that I don't even know about our farm. They want to know just one section, section 19, which is on second to the last page, page number 15. They want to know, report your estimate of the current market value of land and buildings. And then they want to know all land and buildings owned, all land, buildings rented or leased from others, all land and buildings rented or leased to others. And then they want to know what your estimate of the current value of machinery, equipment, implements used for farm-related activities on this operation, regardless of ownership, on a specific date, which would be December 31st, and include cars, combines, pumps, dryers, computers, motors, plows, trucks, tractors, discs, tanks, feeders, harrows, tools, dairy equipment, irrigation equipment, grinding and mixing equipment, etc. That's just one section, of which there are a lot of sections. There's no way I can complete that. How would I possibly answer that accurately? I can't. So in order not to mislead the government, I can't answer it. We'll be right back. We're talking about farming the government, and if you do this, you'll probably get a questionnaire or a pamphlet that they want you to fill out under threat of the wrath of the federal government. And so I've got one little section of the agricultural census that they sent me. And here's one question, but it has parts A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And that question is, for the items listed below, report the number on this operation as of December 31st. Include machinery, equipment, and implements used for the farm or ranch business between or during the year, okay? Or kept on this operation. They want to know the number in operation of trucks, including pickups, tractors less than 40 horsepower, tractors 40 to 99 horsepower, tractors 100 horsepower or more, grain and bean combines that are self-propelled, cotton pickers and strippers that are self-propelled, forage harvesters self-propelled, and hay balers. They want to know the number. And then they want to know, of these, how many were manufactured in the last 5 years. Well, does that include the ones that do work and don't work, the ones that are kept for parts? I mean, I don't know how to answer these questions. So, Michael Olson, if you do go for the government cheese, you may end up getting, pamphlets like this that threaten you that if you don't comply, you will bear the full brunt of the USDA, whatever that is.
Well,
so as you said, there are risks.
You make a really interesting point with your pamphlet and your questionnaire. When you sign up with the government for its aid, you essentially become taking on a partner for your business, and you become reliant on them, and they become part of your operation. They're your partner, essentially. Now, when you do that, and you enter into this agreement, you enter into a system in which you are the little guy with a few acres and competing with big guys with a lot of acres for that government help, partnership. Now, those who have the economies of scale sufficient to influence government are going to be the ones who win in this relationship. If they have 10,000 acres and you have 1 acre and it costs $10,000 to donate to the government or to a politician, it's only going to cost them $1 an acre. It's going to cost you $10,000. So the larger you become, the more impact you will have on that relationship. So it seems to me if you're going to be a government farmer, then what you really want to do is get as many acres as you possibly can so that you can spread your influence costs over as much acreage as you can. Now, if you're not going to go in that direction, you're going to always be at a disadvantage. You'll be like the organic farmers who signed up for this incredible program, And all of a sudden are steamrolled by industrial growers who have the economies of scale sufficient to change the rules. And so, everybody loves the idea of getting $10 million, free from the government a year. Who wouldn't like that? But to play that game, you're going to have, the economies of scale, and you're going to have to, really go in that direction. And if you don't, then you're always going to be on the short end of the stick.
I totally agree with what you said. Absolutely. And, I look at some farms around here and I go, well, how are these guys doing it? They've got about the same number of cows that we have. Their house is brand new. Their fence is brand new. They've got brand new green tractors. Ours are rust-colored. They've got brand new aluminum cattle trailers. Ours are rust-colored. They've got all this great equipment, hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment. I go, those cows look just like ours. They're not any better. How are they doing it? And I think you hit the nail on the head. They know how to play the game. And the field is not flat, as our fellow farmers around here would say. Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. I'm delighted to be broadcasting with Harry Cooper. Harry Cooper and I met quite a number of years ago at a convention. And this was a military convention. And we didn't know each other before then, but we certainly do now. And he's been to the Get Prepared Expo, and he's been on the air with us. And his website, sharkhunters.com, shark, S-H-A-R-K, hunters.com. And so, Harry, welcome to USA Prepares.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah. Well, Harry, when I was in elementary school, I was taught that Adolf Hitler killed himself on April 30th of 1945, just as the Allied troops were coming into Berlin. So he realized that, according to what I was told, he realized that he was gonna lose any moment, and he killed himself. And his wife of ours, Ava Brown, killed herself with cyanide, and under orders by Adolf Hitler, their bodies were to be carried up through the bunker's emergency exit, doused in gasoline, and set aflame in the garden outside the bunkers, or outside the bunker. That's what we were told.
Yeah, we all were. I was told that.
That's probably not accurate.
Well, it's not at all accurate. It's fiction. We're the ones who broke that story 20 years ago that he was not dead in the bunker. Others have come along later, copied our book, made TV stuff out of it. I just got back from Argentina just this past June. We were having snowball fights down there. It's middle of winter down there. It was my 10th trip down there. But we learned 20 years ago that Hitler did not commit suicide. Ava Brown did not commit suicide. Whether he wanted to stay or not, we'll never know. But he was forcibly drugged under orders of Martin Bormann and removed. Bormann was the power behind the throne at that point. And Bormann wanted to keep the Reich alive, and he needed a figurehead, which was Hitler. So he was forcibly removed and set up in a very nice estate in Patagonia, about 800 miles southwest of Buenos Aires. I've been there in 2008, 2009. I was just there in June. They were so nice. They turned the key in the gate up by the highway and then opened the buildings and said, okay, let us know when you're done. Gave us a full run. You can go to the website, sharkhunters.com, and then look at our YouTube channel. Not only the estate house where Hitler lived, but also the guest houses, the boathouse, and about 500 or so yards away, the remains of the farm that helped support this area. remember, when he moved there in 1945 until 1955, this might as well have been on the dark side of the moon. It was out beyond anything. There was no phone lines out there. There were no rail lines. There was no airport at the time. In and out by seaplane was about the only way people could get there, or by an incredibly primitive road that took more than a full day out of Buenos Aires. So it was very safe. And once he got there, and Bormann came to South America also, and so did thousands of guys from the Reich. Bormann realized that raising another million-man army and starting out to get into combat was not the way to go. He had so much incredible amount of loot, cash, money, cash of other denominations from other countries, precious metal, stones, and the numbers to the bank accounts, etc. So they just started about 750 corporations, some of which are worldwide corporations in business today. So suddenly Hitler was no longer necessary. Well, he couldn't very well bump off their Fuhrer, so he just put him out there and told him enjoy life. And this little town of San Carlos de Bariloche, which was kind of across the lake from where Hitler lived. It was on a huge big lake called Lake Nahuel Huapi, 800 miles southwest of Buenos Aires. Now, the town of Bariloche was a tiny little town back in those days. It's a huge, big resort area now. But there was nothing to do. But there was a ton of former SS officers living in Bariloche. And they formed the German-American Cultural Center. That was Erich Priebke helped form that. He was a former SS captain. I think the rank is called Sturmbannführer. He was a member of shark hunters, Priebke was. And he was also one of the guys in Hitler's personal guard there. And the darndest thing, we the people, we were baloneyed. We were fed all sorts of baloney. Hitler committed suicide, et cetera, et cetera. Yet we have hundreds of FBI files and CIA files from those days, OSS they were called. They said flat out in those files of 1945, they knew Hitler was gone. They knew he was in Argentina. But it was important to let the world think he was dead. There are reasons why, which we put out in our book. I wrote a book about it called Hitler in Argentina, and it was the first big work on that subject. Others, like I say, have copied it. They've gotten it wrong. They all say that Hitler escaped on board the submarine U-530. Absolutely not true. In the first place, Hitler was extremely claustrophobic. And secondly, he got seasick at the drop of a hat. So to think he would spend a month or two cooped up in a stinky steel tube bouncing around in the ocean makes no sense. But also, the skipper of U-530, Captain Otto Wehrmuth, was a member of shark hunters, and he talked to one of my guys for a whole day, and he swore there were no passengers aboard. Plus, we have confirmed that Hitler was in the Fuhrer bunker on his birthday, the 20th of April, 1945, because we've talked to people who were in there with him. Captain Ali Kramer, for one, who was also a member of shark hunters. And they said he was in the bunker on the 20th of April. On the 20th of April, U-530 was already 3 days out to sea, so how could Hitler get aboard if the submarine was already gone? So all this is explained in the book. And then, of course, talking to the wide-eyed person who believes the propaganda we were taught, they suddenly yell out, "No, they've got the body." And I ask, "Well, who's got the body?" And they tell me, "The Russians have the body. It's in the Red Army Museum." And I tell them, I'm an honorary Russian submarine officer, and I have run of the Red Army Museum, and I've been through it several times. There's no body. And if Stalin would have had Hitler's body, it would have been on display in the Kremlin wall. Those guys were not the best of friends. So, and they had the piece of the skull with the bullet hole through it that they said was Hitler's, and then about 10, 15 years ago, an independent forensic pathologist examined it and found it was the skull of a young woman. So much for that. Now, just recently, they've suddenly discovered a jawbone that nobody knew anybody had. How convenient. And that's all contrived as well. So we know he died down there on the 13th of February, 1962, in Bolivia. So, the committed suicide in the bunker? No. So there you have it in a nutshell.
Yeah. So why? What is the reason that this fantastic story of the dual suicide of Adolf Hitler and his wife in the Fuhrer bunker, the burning of the bodies, why even say that? Why not say he escaped or we don't know where he is? Why make this thing up?
That's a good question, and it's got a very obvious answer. First off, I know from firsthand experience because I was around in those days. I was just a little kid, but I remember the end of the war. And what was it, 1944, Mussolini got caught, hung by his heels and machine gunned. See, during the war, we were fighting against Germany, Japan, and Italy. As it got on in the war, when it was obvious we were going to win, then we were fighting against Hitler, Tojo, and Mussolini. They had personalized it. The Germans, Japanese, and Italians, they were all good people, but we had to get rid of the leadership. I guess that had to do with how to reconstruct the economies. I don't know. Okay, Mussolini, we know what happened to him. Machine gun, hung by his heels, machine gunned. And we were told by a fellow who was there that, if your heart, even if you're hanging upside down, your heart is pumping your blood around. But if you're dead, your heart quits pumping, and all that blood comes down into your face, and apparently his face kind of blew up. So we know what happened to Mussolini. Tojo, the war minister in Japan, we know what happened to him. He shot himself, didn't do the job very well. The U.S. nursed him back to life and then hanged him. So we know what happened to those two guys. But Hitler, the one they described as the worst evil of the bunch, they can't very well say he got away because then people would be screaming to go get him. And
okay, we'll be right back. Very well. And we'll continue the story. Harry Cooper, sharkhunters.com. Harry Cooper's with us, sharkhunters.com, sharkhunters.com. And Harry, I'm paraphrasing, but you mentioned something like this, that if Adolf Hitler escaped and the people learned that he escaped, they'd cry out, go get him.
That's right.
So, and you're saying that the Allies couldn't allow that. And why couldn't we just go get him and hang him?
That is a very simple question that does not have a very simple answer. There's two reasons, and I'm giving away part of what's in my book, Hitler in Argentina. First off, I was a special weapons guy in the Air Force. I spent 6 long, hard months in training, learning all about hydrogen bombs, atom bombs, etc. And the first couple of weeks, we saw movies on the Air Force atomic weapons program, and we were not doing real well. And then suddenly, Germany surrendered. Our scientists got real smart, and we had uranium that we didn't have before, and we had a guy who showed our scientists how to make the infrared triggers for the atom bomb. For a nuclear explosion to go off properly, you take a piece of uranium, U-235, about the size of a small grapefruit, and you surround it with 64 shaped charges that have to go off at the exact same millimicrosecond to squeeze in and convert this ball of uranium into critical mass, and then you've got a nuclear blast. If one goes off a zillionth of a second too soon or too late, you got nothing but junk flying around. Our guys weren't getting it done. All of a sudden, this guy came over. As a matter of fact, it was a German scientist on board a German submarine that was on its way to Tokyo when the war ended, and they were in the North Atlantic, so they just came to the U.S. to surrender. He became a member of Shark Hunters later. His name was Dr. Heinz Schlicka, who later went to work for a company up in Milwaukee as part of Operation Paperclip. That's another whole subject. But our guys suddenly got smart. We got jet engines. We had jet technology. We had jet fighter planes. We had jet bombers coming along. We had rockets, all that. So there are two possibilities. One, there was a quid pro quo. You leave Hitler alone, he ain't going to bother anybody. You don't bother Hitler, and we'll give the U.S. all this high-tech stuff, and believe me, it was a ton of high-tech. Leave Hitler alone, we give you all this stuff, otherwise we give it all to the Soviet Union. That's one theory, and I think it's a pretty good theory. The other theory, which is pretty obvious, when they got down there, Martin Bormann, as I say, had a ton of money in what today would be trillions of dollars. He and Juan Perón got to be buddies. Juan Perón had his hand out, and Martin Bormann kept putting money into his hand. And we're talking massive amounts of money, with which Perón used to buy his way to the presidency of Argentina. In 1945, he was just a colonel with no money. In 1946, he had massive amount of money, 3 mansions in Buenos Aires. I visited all 3 of them. And he was president of Argentina. So to go after Hitler would not have been a quiet little snatch and grab like the Mossad did with Eichmann in, 1960 or 61. It would have required a full-scale invasion because Perón was building up his military with this money that he was getting from Bormann, and he had a large military base in Bariloche where Hitler was living. So to get Hitler, it would have required a full-scale invasion. And in 1945-46, people were tired of the war. They didn't want to see any more war. So they figured we'll take all the technology, leave Hitler quietly, sit out there in the wilderness, and go on about our business. That's all spelled out in my next book, Hitler and the Secret Alliance. There's 3 books in the Hitler Escape trilogy.
We'll be right back with Harry Cooper. Harry Cooper's with us. Harry, in 2013, Time Magazine posted an article, and they listed what they say is the top 100, the most significant figures in history. And here they are, the top 7 in order. Number 1, Jesus. Number 2, Napoleon. Mohammed, Shakespeare, Lincoln, Washington, and Hitler, number 7. Then following that, number 15, Julius Caesar. 21 is Sir Isaac Newton. Number 36, which I don't understand at all, is George W. Bush. 37, Churchill. 64, Voltaire. Number 93, Nikola Tesla. So I think their list is not ordered properly. Now, I can understand Jesus being number 1, but I think Hitler is way higher than number 7. Would you agree with that?
Well, I know in 1938 he was Time Magazine's Man of the Year, and he was in the running to be Man of the Century, except the war came along and the propaganda came out, and that had to change. Churchill, a lot of my, I've got members in 77 countries who get our magazine, and your listeners can send me an email at sharkhunters@sharkhunters.com, all one word, sharkhunters@sharkhunters.com. Say they heard us on the show today and they want a copy of our magazine, and I'll send an electronic copy of the magazine to them by return mail, no charge, no strings attached. And a lot of our members in England have absolutely no use for Churchill because he's the one who kept the war going. Hitler kept trying to reach peace proposals with England, and Churchill shot them down. A lot of Americans who know the story of Eisenhower can't stand Eisenhower because of his starvation camp order, by which over 1.1 million German soldiers were starved to death months after the war ended. So, one man's hero is another man's villain, or vice versa. Remember, George Washington was a wanted criminal in the eyes of the Brit because he was a British colonel and he led the revolt against England. So I'm not comparing Washington with Churchill or Roosevelt, believe me. Washington was a great man. Churchill and Roosevelt, not so much. Anyhow, where Hitler belongs on the ranking, where anybody belongs on any ranking, depends on who's doing the ranking. And remember, the people in the lamestream press, those are all liberals. I'm surprised they didn't have Barack Obama at the top of the list.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned your trilogy. I'd love to hear more about that. So if we're interested in learning more about you, we can go to sharkhunters.com. If we'd like a copy of your magazine, free, gratis, no strings attached, sharkhunters@sharkhunters.com to get a free copy of the magazine.
Yeah, you keep putting a pause between shark. You keep putting a pause in there. It's just one word, Shark Hunters. So, yeah.
No, I do that so that...
Go ahead.
Yeah, there is no space. No space, but it's one word, Shark Hunters. And the reason I'm doing that is so our class can write it down.
Okay,
Shark
very
Hunters is one word at sharkhunters.com. So it's SHARKHUNTERS at SHARKHUNTERS.com. All one word. Okay.
That's correct. Just send an email here and say they heard us on the show. They would like a copy of the magazine, and bang, zoom, within a few hours it'll be back to you. Like I say, it's free, no strings attached. And then if you want to read about Hitler's escape, the Hitler Escape Trilogy, you can find that on our website, sharkhunters.com. And there are 3 books. The first one, Hitler in Argentina, came out 2004, I believe it was, and it gives the whole story told through the eyes of an agent who was there. He was a high-level Abwehr agent. He was in the Fuhrer bunker. He saw Hitler forcibly drugged under orders of Martin Bormann. He saw Hitler removed. He met with Hitler in September of 1952. And I asked one of our members years ago, who was a captain in the U.S. Navy and Naval Intelligence, I said, this guy's nuts. Everybody knows Hitler committed suicide in the bunker in 1945, and Captain Bob says, no, he didn't. We knew he got away to Argentina. So the book was written through the eyes of Don Angel, who was the Spanish spy working for the Abwehr, and it's loaded with FBI files, first-person accounts. And incidentally, I was just down there in June. I met with a lady who saw Hitler in 1954. She and her husband were down in Patagonia at a very upscale hotel for their honeymoon. And since Argentina was not really directly involved in the war, in the combat section sense of it, they were keeping track of both sides. They were very, very interested. And so they knew who was who. And the lady said to her husband, she says, "That man on the other side of the dining room looks like Adolf Hitler." And her husband says, "That man is Adolf Hitler." And we got that all on tape. I videotaped her this last June. So the first book, Hitler in Argentina, tells all about Hitler's escape. The next one, Hitler and the Secret Alliance, tells how this was possible. Starting in about 1905, large numbers of very wealthy, ultra-wealthy Germans and some Italians moved to Argentina and were given huge pieces of property, hundreds of square miles of property to start their ranches. And so the foundation was there. The Germans were there. They had the banks. They had the various corporations. They had everything. And then comes World War I, and that's over, and even more of them came. And then comes World War II, and they were very patriotic to their fatherland. And so when the war was over and the Reich had collapsed, they welcomed these guys with open arms. And it's long been theorized, and I think more than a theory, that the Vatican and the Red Cross helped a ton of guys from the Reich escape. Down in Argentina, for instance, there's a whole lot of people named Kirchner. Well, Kirchner is a German word for churchman. So they'd get the passport from the Vatican with a phony name. Okay, you're Juan Kirchner or whatever. And so the second book, Hitler and the Secret Alliance, tells all about how it was possible. And it tracks Hitler and Bormann through South America and a lot of the high-ranking guys from the Reich. Then the third book, which we just came out with about a month ago, we're already selling the heck out of this thing, thank God, is called Hitler's Spy Web in South America. In the first two books, we told what we knew, and based by hard fact. The third book, Hitler's Spy Web, we not only tell more of what we know, we give the actual source. We name the names, we say what spies, what agents, what whoever actually gave us the information. So they cross-match it 6 ways from Sunday, and it comes up the same. This is not theory. So many of these other books have footnotes galore because they copied this, that, and the other thing from other books in libraries, and that's fine. That's legal. Borrow it and put in a footnote. You won't find footnotes in our book because it's all first person, boots on the ground, and if I don't go there and talk to the person, I'm not going to say, hey, we read in such and such a book that this guy said this and that. I go there, I talk to these people. Erich Priebke, like I say, was SS captain. I had dinner with his son right after he got arrested and confined to house arrest in Rome. I had dinner with his son, learned all about it, talked to various other people there who knew Hitler. Every year on the 20th of April, which was Hitler's birthday, they had a big shindig at a couple of the very, very upscale hotels down there. They'd have a birthday party. Sometimes Hitler would be there. But they always had a picture of Hitler and a swastika flag. So this is not stuff I get from somebody else's research. I've been down to South America 10 times so far. I'm in Germany, Austria, usually twice a year, every year since 1988. So this is all hard fact, first-person interviews, not hearsay, not stuff I read in somebody else's book, because I don't think that's research at all. If you're going to do your research in a library, you really aren't a researcher.
So I've got a question for you.
Shoot.
I've got a copy of Hitler in Argentina, and it's signed by you. So if
I remember sending that to you, yeah.
Yeah, and the most important volumes in my library are the ones of USA Preparedness instructors that are signed. So there's plenty of time if you do buy Christmas presents, class. There's plenty of time to order this. Now, Harry Cooper, will you sign each copy of the trilogy, Hitler in Argentina, as I have a copy, Hitler and the Secret Alliance, and Hitler's Spy Web in South America? Will they all be signed if ordered?
You betcha. You order them from Shark Hunters, we ship them out, and I sign each and every one of them. In the beginning, I didn't think that was a big deal. Oh, big deal. Who cares about Harry Cooper's signature? Then I see them on eBay. They're selling for 2 and 3 times the original price, and they put a big whoop-de-doo in there about, hey, it's signed by the author. So, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, well, mine's not going to show up on eBay. Those are my most treasured possessions, class, the volumes from the USA Preparedness Instructors, and you can get one as well and enjoy it as much as I do. Harry Cooper, in your travels, have you bumped into any USA Preparedness Instructors, whether it be in Europe or in the United States?
About the only time was when I was at your convention down there in Missouri. Tons of them there.
Okay. Okay, great. We'll be right back. And my next question for Harry Cooper is, 750 corporations throughout the world. Can you name some of them that were a result of Martin Bormann's efforts? When we come back, Harry Cooper, sharkhunters.com. Harry Cooper's with us, sharkhunters.com. Harry Cooper, Bormann started 750 or so corporations.
Right.
And placed them throughout the world, and he cloaked the ownership of these corporations using every conceivable device known to the legal mind. Can you tell us some of these corporations? What are their names?
Nope. I've gotten accustomed to breathing, Vince.
Okay.
We know
Can't do it.
Some of the corporations, and they're massive, huge international corporations. One of them a few years ago, I wrote to the chairman of the board of their corporation, and said that we had evidence that that's how they got started, and we would like to hear from them. And I thought maybe, silly me, I thought maybe they'd send me a couple of $100,000 and say, keep your mouth shut. No, I got a letter from them saying I'm doing this research at great personal risk. So I figured, well, they're not going to pay me, and I ain't going to say anything while I'm still alive. Mm-hmm. But you would know some of the names.
Yeah. My research tells me that they are, let's say in the oil industry and the chemical industry and so forth. So you don't need to say anything, but class, you can do your own research. You can type in Martin Bormann.
He had the right idea. Rather than start a war to conquer stuff with the sword, you conquer stuff with the cash register.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he.
So what lessons have we? What lessons have we learned? Is it possible that there could be another person arising to the level of influence of an Adolf Hitler? Is that possible in your thinking? Is it possible for that to be repeated, or have we gotten past the ability to do that?
For a person to rise to that level of power, absolutely. There are several multi-zillionaires in this world that have that kind of power. But to rise to that level of power using a military structure, no, that's not going to happen. I doubt we're going to see anybody rise to that level again because of all the restrictions and controls, et cetera, put into place. The United States was not a very big country back in those days when World War II started. Argentina was a richer and more powerful country than the United States. It was the war that got the United States up to where we are. Germany had the best trained, best equipped combat soldiers there were, but they couldn't sink our ships fast enough or shoot down our planes fast enough because we kept building them faster than they could wipe them out. And the Soviets, they didn't mind losing a couple of 100,000 people today because they had 500,000 more people coming tomorrow. So for any one nation to militarily rock the world like that again today, I don't believe that can happen. Financially, okay. Well, look at how Jeff Bezos, for instance, who just now became a trillionaire with Amazon and all the companies they control. And we're told that if you're too conservative and too right wing, they suddenly just shut you off and you're gone. Whether this is true or not, I don't know. Google is accused of being the same thing. So there's nobody ever going to, in our lifetime, going to militarily rock the world like Hitler did. Financially, that's another story. And don't look at Vladimir Putin to rock the world either. He's not a lunatic. He's not a madman. I met him. I spent 15 minutes talking to him. He's a patriotic Russian. And he's not a wuss like Obama. When I met him, guys, try to give the handshake. It makes the other guy's eyes blink. Well, me and him did that for about 30, 40 seconds, and neither one of us blinked. He's a tough guy. So, but he's the most, he's the most powerful outside of this country, and he just wants his country to be safe for his people. Why not?
Harry Cooper, I read a NewYorkTimes.com post, and it says a report by the U.S. Treasury Department in 1946 stated that 750 companies were set up all over the world by German industrialists following the August 10th, 1944 meeting in Strasbourg. Yep, you're absolutely right.
Well,
exactly what you said is right. Thanks so much for being with us.
In Argentina, you'll read about all these clandestine